since the time I was 12 years old, I have been focused, and it was kind of a weird thing for a 12-year-old kid when all of my friends were building these little model cars. Remember back in the day when you build these model cars? And
get the glue on your fingers.
Yeah, half my friends were sniffing the glue, but the other half were putting the models together. I got focused on something else, and that was why people do what they do and don't do what they don't do. And that has driven me since I was 12 years old to the point that I'm sitting here today. When I finished my university work, I did a year's postdoctoral fellowship in forensic psychology. And I really got focused on the criminal mind at that point in figuring out why people commit the crimes they do, what goes through their mind at the moment. If you're gonna kill somebody, if you're gonna hack somebody to death, isn't it interesting to know what's going through their mind at that moment? What makes that okay? And it's amazing to me to get into all of that and unpack that for people.
Why do you think America is so fascinated with these issues? The true crime genre seems to have captivated all of us.
Well, I think it scares the bejeebers out of us, for one thing.
Yeah,
you know,
it does.
Because predators are among us. I mean, it's just like molestation. Only 5% of all molestation and sexual assault happens by strangers. 95% of it happens from somebody you know. It's Uncle Bob, it's the neighbor next door. This idea about somebody at the schoolyard in a trench coat, you know, and you want a little candy kid, that's only 5% of it. 95% are people. Predators live among us. And so people want to know, you'll see a crime like a family annihilator like Chris Watts. We did the Chris Watts story long ago, so tragic. And you know, people will say, who does that? When they say that to me, it's not rhetorical. They're really saying, Dr. Phil, who does that? What kind of person does that? How do we spot them? How do we stay away from those people?
So Phil's got this brand new podcast, very popular, called Analysis of Murder by Dr. Phil. His first season delves into one of the most disturbing cases that I've ever looked into, Gypsy Rose's participation in the revenge killing of her own mother, Dee Dee. Now, Gypsy Rose had spent her childhood trapped in her mother's bizarre web of lies and deception. Take a look. It started with a startling Facebook status that left friends of Dee Dee Blanchard panicked. The tone completely out of character for the doting, selfless mother. Dee Dee had dedicated her life to caring for her disabled, chronically ill 19-year-old daughter, Gypsy Rose, wheelchair-bound and frail due to leukemia and muscular dystrophy. The next post was even more disturbing and resulted in the arrival of police. Officers would make a gruesome discovery. Dee Dee Blanchard had been brutally murdered, stabbed to death, her invalid daughter missing, and the very sick girl was without the medication or wheelchair she desperately needed. Officers believed the murder and abduction had taken place 24 hours before Dee Dee's body was found. The race to find Gypsy Rose was on. 24 hours later, it would end with a shocking twist. Gypsy had been found at the home of Nicholas Godejohn, not her kidnapper, but her boyfriend. It turns out much of what we had known about Dee Dee and Gypsy had been lies. From their tales of medically induced financial hardships to Gypsy's lifelong list of illnesses, all faked for sympathy and financial gain. Not only was Gypsy not sick, she was actually 23, not 19. Nor had she been abandoned by her father. Rod Blanchard and his new wife, Christy, had always supported the daughter his ex-wife claimed was gravely ill. Gypsy was sentenced to 10 years in prison for her role in her mother's murder. Yet, many sympathize with Gypsy. Her stepmom, Christy, told me what she looks forward to when she gets out of prison. What hopes and dreams does she have?
To walk outside, you know, check the mail, play with our dogs, have a like a family night.
It's super complex. What drew you to this story in particular?
Well, I was really interested in, it's commonly referred to as the Munchausens by proxy, or as it's listed in the DSM-5 now, factitious disorder imposed on another. And this is such a bizarre and layered situation where this is just somebody that makes someone else sick for secondary gain or for a number of reinforcements. But I have to tell you, Doc. It's in the Diagnostic and Statistic Manual of the American Psychiatric Association. I'm not at all convinced that this is a mental illness, as opposed to somebody just being really manipulative and exploitive and using somebody for their own gain.
So I have a portion of Gypsy's medical records here. The whole thing is huge, and it's a small window into this web of lies, and I see all kinds of things which we'll get to. But let me just point them out, and maybe you can help us understand why this would even make sense. And stuff's shocking. So sleep apnea, it can be lethal. And so she was put on a breathing machine.
This was at 3 months old when she first put this out there for people to consider, which should have been a really red flag for a lot of her family members, her husband Rod. At 3 months old, sleep apnea, and nobody observed it but her.
And she was put on a feeding tube, right? And I can't find any reason for her to be in a feeding tube except the mom said she couldn't tolerate eating food.
No, and think about that. We're talking about like 15, 16 years she's on this feeding tube. She could eat fine.
Even worse, she was told she had leukemia, and then Gypsy Rose had her head shaved by her mom, so she looked like she was going through chemotherapy.
Yeah, and she would do this so she could put her on display to get donations, a house from Habitat for Humanity, all these fundraisers for people, and so she'd shave her head, put her on display, and let her talk in her squeaky voice, if at all.
Because of all this, she's actually lost her teeth. She was put on epilepsy medications. I mean, this is a big problem for a young woman.
What was next? Start amputating feet, hands? I mean, this little girl was looking at ending her life if she didn't do something. So
Dee Dee was also told, and she told everybody, that she was much younger than she was. That her daughter Gypsy had the mental capacity of a 7-year-old. Be sure to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss anything. And remember to check back often to see what's new.